Hi everybody, I'm the Drink Pro, and today we're drinking Wild Turkey 101. Hey everybody, it's the Drink Pro. Thanks again for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the first episode. This is episode number 2. I'm going to keep making new episodes. I didn't offer a lot of preamble in the first episode because I wanted you to feel like you jumped right into the experience. It needed to feel natural and like something you're going to see on a regular basis. I wanted you to get a sense and a feel for the show. So today I'm going to be a little bit more open about how I'm planning to operate this program moving forward, what other kinds of things I'm hoping to do, and really what the Drink Pro YouTube channel is supposed to be about. And while I'm talking about that, I'm going to be drinking Wild Turkey 101. Now I've got the bourbon and the rye here with me. I'm going to start with the bourbon. It's a lot easier to find. They're both called 101 because they are at 101 proof, which is 50.5% alcohol. These are standard whiskeys. You should see them on most shelves. The bourbon, that is. The rye is much harder to find, but if you find it, I highly recommend picking it up. It will cost you a lot more, though. Probably about double, maybe 1.5 times if you got a store that's treating you right. But they are both fantastic whiskeys, and they're both great expressions of a classic bourbon and a classic rye. A lot of whiskey aficionados think you have to buy expensive bottles, and they forget about the early experiences in whiskey. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to be starting my program tasting Buffalo Trace, Wild Turkey, classic products that most people have heard of or seen that want to dip their toe into the whiskey world. That isn't to say there aren't fantastic, interesting, rare whiskeys out there. There absolutely are. But the first thing I want people to see is the serious and engaged approach you can take with whiskeys that are readily available. You don't have to have hundreds of dollars to buy amazing whiskey, and you don't have to devote your time to trying to hunt down interesting bottles. You absolutely can, and I like doing it, but you don't have to. You can really enjoy the experience of relatively straightforward, easy to find whiskeys. Without further ado, let's give it a taste. Wild Turkey makes some of my favorite products, and I expect to taste more of them later on in the show. As I continue to create different videos, different kinds of videos, I also expect to do a flight of Wild Turkey products, where you'll see Wild Turkey 101 Bourbon and Rye again, but also Wild Turkey Rare Breed, Wild Turkey Kentucky Spirit, Wild Turkey's product that doesn't bear its name, Russell's. Russell's has the 10-year reserve, a 6-year reserve, barrel pick program bottles. Lots of interesting stuff coming out of Wild Turkey. They also have very premium bottles, the Decades bottles, the Revival bottles, Master's Keep. These are $200 bottles very often, and I'm probably not going to review any of those unless I have a very generous benefactor who gives me a bottle or gives me a taste or something. Then I'll be happy to review it and share it with you. I actually expect to review and share some whiskeys that I have samples of in the near future. But for now, let's stick with the 101 and give it a smell. Now, this is very different from the Buffalo Trace. The Buffalo Trace is a lot sweeter and rounder on the nose. The Wild Turkey mash bill, which is the grain profiles that go into the product while the whiskey is being distilled, this is actually the grain that turns into the whiskey. It's a much higher rye mash bill, and you can really tell on the nose. Is you get this sharpness. It's definitely still sweet. You definitely still get the corn, perhaps even more corn than you get with Buffalo Trace. But it's got a lot more, but it's got a sharper sweetness to it. I definitely still get the cherry. The vanilla smells a lot more like vanilla extract. It's the sharpness and the alcohol come through a little bit more. This is a little higher proof as well than the Buffalo Trace, so that's worth keeping in mind. Another thing I find with the Wild Turkey that I don't get any of in the Buffalo Trace, or a lot of bourbons for that matter, that are on the lower proof scale, or on the lower dollar scale, is the wood notes. Now you're going to hear a lot about wood notes in whiskey. There are more like drier wood notes. There's more like soggy bog wood notes. There's peat moss notes. You're going to have people talk about the bitterness of oak tannins. I'm sure I will. This smells more like you put a tree in a vat of alcohol. This smells more like you put a tree in a vat of alcohol. This is really woody. in a very classic, natural sense. I'm hesitating to call it earthy because there's no muddled notes. It's very bright because of that rye spice, because of the sweetness, because of the relatively high proof for something at this price point. The more I smell this, I'm getting a floral note. Oh, and it's wonderful. And the sweetness is starting to come out. When you first pour something and you don't let it sit, it's going to be brighter and hotter and more difficult. But now that I've been smelling it for a while, the sweetness and the fruit notes are starting to come out. I'm getting more interesting things happening. It's becoming more citrusy. I'm getting some lemon zest, that bitter citrus note. The sweetness is subsiding. It's not nearly as bright. All right, I gotta taste this. I can't keep talking about it. Oh, this really is one of my favorite pours, guys. I really like Wild Turkey products, and the 101 is a classic pour. You cannot beat this for the price point. I think mine was under $30. Cannot beat this for under $30. I challenge you to find a bourbon that's better for under $30. I'll try it. I'll do it on this show. Put it in the comments, and we'll find out. For something this high proof, the Wild Turkey 101 bourbon really doesn't have that burn and that kick. But it doesn't have a lot of flavor right off the bat. The flavor comes mid-palate and later in the palate. For certainly the finish that I'm getting right now is longer than the Buffalo Trace. It's pretty long for a bourbon of this price point. It's got the hints of pepper, but it's more woody. You get some of the bitterness from barrel tannins, but it's woody. It's clean. It's kind of like chewing on a barrel stave, but only just a little bit. Some whiskeys are just like putting a piece of wood in your mouth. But this is more like reminiscent. It's memories of a barrel stave, not actively chewing on it in the moment. So that sweetness is right up front. That malty sweetness. It smells like brown sugar and molasses, but it tastes corn, honey, malt. It's very sweet initially, but that drops off in the middle. The sweetness in the beginning of the palate drops off mid-palate, and it becomes a lot more herbal. On paper, the difference between bourbon and rye is pretty simple. Rye whiskey, that's bourbon. Rye whiskey has to be 51% rye. 51% rye grain in the mash bill versus 51% corn in the mash bill. I hope that's right. Well, sometimes you put yourself in a position where you start thinking about what you just said and you go, oh shit, is that actually what's going on? I am going to swear on this program, by the way, so you better get fucking used to it. Oh, I love that sound. I'll never get sick of that sound. A lot of bourbons have some rye in it. I would say most even. That's kind of a controversial statement maybe, but 51% rye really changes the characteristics. So let's go ahead and give this a smell. Oh yeah. So the sweetness that you get from the corn and the malt is all gone and it's replaced. It's a much richer, deeper, almost wine quality. There's still a sweetness there, but it's sweet like a grape or like a cherry. It's a dark, rich, fruity sweetness, not a concentrated, sugary sweetness. But it's very good. The sweetness, that bite of the rye, that's hard to describe. If you haven't had that before, think about having rye bread. It's very much like that kind of bite, but in a liquid form with some more sweetness than you're going to get from the bread. Okay, I'm done nosing this thing. It's fantastic, but I need to taste it. And we're running out of time. Not nearly as sweet as the bourbon, and I like it. But it's much more well-balanced, in my opinion. The bourbon is very interesting. It's very complex. There's a lot going on, especially for something below $30. But the rye is so well-balanced. There's a breadiness in the mid-palate. The finish is very soft and gentle. You don't get that woodiness, but you still get hints of an earthy note. It's a little bit more opaque and muddled than the crispness of the bourbon, which is ironic because usually, in my opinion, the ryes are going to be brighter and sharper. in conclusion, I think you definitely need to go get some of this whiskey. Wild Turkey's making great products. They're bourbon, cheap, delicious, complex. They're rye, very well balanced. Harder to find, but definitely worth it if you can find it. I'm going to go enjoy these by myself for a little bit, and I hope that you keep drinking like a professional. Cheers.